Hello and welcome to this painting video. In this video we're going to show how to paint the High Gladiatrix from the Arena of Shades box set. Now by following the methods and techniques in this guide you can easily transfer this to any of the Daughters of Cain models within the set. Now we're using both a mix of classic and contrast methods and we're painting the model up to battle ready as well. Now before we begin painting we'll need to undercoat the model. As you can see here I've used grey cere, which is a nice starting point. And the first colour is going to be applying a base coat, and the first base coat we'll be using is Iron Hand Steel. Now I'm going to be using this for the armour. So what I'm going to be doing is just applying a little bit to the palette, a little bit of water, just so it's not too thick and goopy. Make sure I get a nice point to the brush, like so. And then once I'm ready to start applying that to the armour. If you're not sure where the armour is, just check the box art for details. With the Iron Hand Steel now applied, all our silver details have been picked out. So what we're now going to do is move on to the rest of the base coats. We're going to start first by using Skull Crusher Brass. This is for any gold details. Then after that we'll move on to Corvus Black for the black leather. Then Mephiston Red for the red Loin Cloth. Wordbearer's Red for the whip. For the jade details such as the clasp on the belt we'll be using Lupercal Green. And then finish off the stone that she stood on with Rakarth Flesh. But first of all, let's start with that Skull Crusher Brass. So what I'm going to do is just load a little bit of that onto the palette. A little bit of water as well. And then get my brush up to a nice point. Give it a couple of rolls just so I'm happy with that. And all I'm going to do is then start picking out the gold details. So we've got just a bit on the belt here and there's some others scattered across the model. Just take your time. Some places you might need to add a second coat. With those gold details picked out, we're now going to move on to the black leather. So I'm just going to turn around and start on the trousers. Also don't forget to do the dagger handle as well. Now the leather's done, we're going to move on to the red loincloth, and for this we'll be using Mephiston Red. Again, take your time. If you're making mistakes, just tidy it with those previous colours. With Mephiston Red now used on the loincloth, we're going to use Wordbearer's Red for the whip. This is a little bit darker, and it looks more like a ruddy red leather brown, which is perfect for using on a whip. With the whip finished, we're now going to move on to the little jade clasp on the front just here. So all I'm doing is just using Lupercal Green to pick this out. With the jade clasp picked out, we're now going to finish off with the base coats by using Rakarth Flesh on the stone. Take your time, and if you're making any mistakes, tidy it with previous colours. Now we've applied all the base coats, what we're now going to do is move on to applying some contrast. We're going to start first by using Golem and Flesh. This is going to be for the skin and the gold details. Then we're going to move on to Basilicanum Grey. This is for most of the details on the model, apart from the silver armour and the white hair. For the silver armour, we'll be using Achillean Green, and all these contrasts have been heavily thinned down with contrast medium. And then we'll finish off by picking out the hair using Apothecary White. But first of all, let's start with Golem and Flesh. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get myself 4 dollops of contrast medium, just apply that onto the palette, give my brush a quick wash and a wipe. And after that, we're just going to get one paintbrush of Golem and Flesh and mix that together. Once I've loaded up my brush and got it to a decent point, I'm then just going to start applying this to any gold details and the skin. I'll start with the skin first and just add that over. If you make any splodges or mistakes, just use the previous base coats to tidy back up. With the Golden Flesh now picked out, what we're now going to do is get Basilicanum Grey, which I've thinned down with 3 parts contrast medium. We're going to apply this to the red details, the black details, also to the stone, and in some places, such as the blade and the tips of the whip, we'll be applying it to that, and some parts of the gold, such as on the greave, and also those bits on the whip as well. Just add a bit of depth to that gold and make it look a little bit more tarnished. Now most of those details have been picked out with Basilicanum Grey. We're just going to pick out that silver armour using Achillean Green thinned down with contrast medium. And what I've done is I've quite heavily thinned this down, so I've used 5 parts contrast medium to 1 part Achillean Green. What we're aiming for here is a nice subtle blue tone to that silver armour. So when it dries, it will just run into those recesses and give it that nice tone that you see on the box art. With that blue tint now added to the silver armour, what we're now going to do is get Apothecary White straight from the pot, and we're just going to coat that over the hair. And take your time and tidy up if you need to. With With that hair now dry, what we're now going to do is finish the model off by basing her. So I'm going to be using Agril Badlands here. I'm going to be using my trusty texture tool. So what I'm going to do is just use the large scoop side first, just get some of that texture on there. And then we're going to then start placing that on the base. So what I'm going to do is just apply that like so, move it around a bit, and then for a bit more accuracy, I'm just going to get the smaller side as we get closer to those details we painted. Now you want to leave this for around about an hour to dry, and once it's dry, paint the rim of the base in a colour that matches your army. For this I'll be using Steel Legion Drab. And there we are with the rim painted, our base is now done. With the texture now dry and the rim of the base painted, our High Gladiatrix is now battle ready. Now there's a couple of things to remember when painting this model. Firstly, when using base paints, try and be as neat as you can. Remember, the neater you are, the better the end result. And if you do make any mistakes, you can always tidy back up at a later point if you want to. Also, when using shades and contrasts, try not to overload your brush as it can quickly run out of control. If you do find that happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy painting your own Daughters of Cain, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.